I shivered violently as the icy wind whipped across my face, the cold seeping through my thin nightgown and chilling me to the bone. The dim streetlights cast eerie shadows along the deserted sidewalk as I trudged forward, my slippered feet already numb. "I'm done with you, Mom. I never wanted you here. Get out!" Marcus's words echoed in my mind, each one a dagger to my heart. How had it come to this? My own son, the child I had loved and nurtured, throwing me out into the freezing night like a worthless piece of trash. Tears streamed down my face, instantly freezing on my cheeks. I pulled my robe tighter around me, but it did little to block the bitter cold. My joints ached, and my legs felt like lead, but I pressed on. Ethan's house was only a few blocks away. He would help me. He had to. As I walked, memories of my late husband Will flooded my mind, the love of my life taken from me far too soon. He had worked tirelessly to provide for our family, leaving me a comfortable home and a sizable inheritance when he passed. But without him, everything had fallen apart. Marcus and his wife, Lauren, had moved in shortly after Will's death, claiming they only wanted to help me. At first, I had welcomed their assistance, grateful for the company and support, but it soon became clear that their true motives were far more sinister. They treated me like a burden, an inconvenience to be tolerated only for the sake of the wealth I had inherited. They belittled me, ignored my wishes, and even started taking control of my finances. And when I dared to protest, their true colors emerged. Marcus had always had a temper, but I had never seen him so enraged as he was tonight. His face twisted with fury. He had grabbed me by the arm, his grip like a vice, and hurled me towards the door. "You ungrateful old hag," he had snarled. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" Lauren, her perfectly made-up face contorted with disdain, had simply stood by and watched, her silence as damning as Marcus's actions. And so here I was, alone and freezing, my own flesh and blood casting me aside like a piece of garbage. But I couldn't give up. Not yet. Ethan would help me. He had to. With renewed determination, I quickened my pace, the icy wind stinging my eyes. Ethan's warm, welcoming home was just up ahead, a sanctuary from the bitter cold and the even colder betrayal of my own family. As I approached his front door, my strength finally failed me. I stumbled, my knees buckling, and collapsed against the doorframe, my trembling fingers desperately pounding on the wood. "Please, Ethan," I silently pleaded. "Please help me." The door flew open, and there stood Ethan, his expression shifting from confusion to horror as he took in my disheveled appearance. "Mom, you're freezing! What happened?" he exclaimed, immediately ushering me inside. The warmth of his home enveloped me, but it did little to ease the chill that had settled deep within my bones. Claire, Ethan's wife, rushed over, her face etched with concern. "Oh my God, Samantha, you're shivering like a leaf," she fretted, wrapping a thick blanket around my shoulders. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat, a lump of emotion rendering me momentarily mute. Ethan guided me to the couch, his arm around me, offering silent support. Finally, I found my voice, and the story spilled forth. I told them everything. Marcus's escalating cruelty, his explosive temper, the way he and Lauren had systematically isolated and mistreated me, all in their relentless pursuit of my inheritance. As I spoke, their expressions morphed from shock to outrage. Claire's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan's jaw clenched, his fists balling at his sides. "That bastard," he growled when I had finished, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare he treat you like that? You're his mother, for God's sake!" Claire's reaction was equally visceral. "This is unacceptable, Samantha. We can't let them get away with this." Her eyes narrowed, a steely determination settling over her features. "I'm a paralegal. I know people in the legal system. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win." Ethan nodded emphatically, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "You're safe now, Mom. I won't let them hurt you again." Tears streamed down my cheeks, but for the first time in years, they weren't born of sorrow or despair. They were tears of relief, of hope, of knowing that I wasn't alone anymore. As Claire made a flurry of phone calls, her voice low and intense, Ethan held me close, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm that had become my life. "We're your family, Mom," he murmured, his words laden with a protective fierceness that momentarily took me aback. "And we're going to make things right." In that moment, I realized just how much I had lost sight of what truly mattered. Marcus and Lauren had systematically stripped me of my dignity, my autonomy, my very sense of self. But Ethan and Claire, with their unwavering love and support, had given me the strength to fight back. As the night wore on and Claire's phone calls yielded promising leads, I felt a newfound sense of determination taking root within me. For too long I had allowed myself to be a victim, cowed by fear and the misguided belief that blood was thicker than water. But no more. With Ethan and Claire at my side, I would stand tall and face the demons that had haunted me for far too long. Marcus and Lauren would soon learn that karma was a fierce mistress, and their misdeeds would not go unpunished. A fire ignited in my belly, a righteous fury that had been dormant for far too long. Justice would be served, one way or another. And as I looked into the determined faces of my loved ones, I knew that this time I wouldn't have to face the battle alone. After a sleepless night spent bolstering my resolve, I found myself back at the house I had once called home. Ethan and Claire flanked me, their presence lending me strength even as dread coiled in my stomach. "You ready for this, Mom?" Ethan asked, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. I nodded, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. Claire produced a small, discreet recording device, pressing it into my palm. "Keep this on you at all times," she instructed, her voice low and urgent. "We need to document everything." With trembling fingers, I concealed the device in the folds of my robe, taking a deep, steadying breath. Ethan rapped sharply on the door, the sound echoing like a death knell. It swung open, and there stood Marcus, his face twisted into a sneer of disdain. Well, look who crawled back," he sneered. "You should have frozen to death out there." I flinched at his words, but Claire's coaching rang in my ears. "Show no fear. Document everything." "I've come to collect my belongings," I stated, forcing my voice to remain level. Marcus barked out a harsh laugh. "Your belongings? This is my house now, you senile old bat. But fine, take your junk and get out. Not before you finish your chores, though." Chores? The indignity of it all threatened to overwhelm me, but I bit back my retort. Ethan's hand found the small of my back, lending me his silent support. "Just do as he says for now, Mom," he murmured. "We'll get through this." And so I meekly followed Marcus's instructions, my hands shaking as I tackled the menial tasks he hurled my way. Each time he barked a fresh order, the recording device in my robe pocket faithfully captured his vitriol. Throughout it all, Lauren watched with a smug expression, her silence somehow more grating than Marcus's taunts. They treated me like a servant in my own home, belittling me at every turn. At one point, as I struggled to lift a heavy box, Marcus' hand shot out, his meaty fingers clamping around my wrist with bruising force. "Hurry up, you useless old hag," he snarled, his face mere inches from mine. "Or do you need another lesson in respect?" The thinly veiled threat hung in the air, his eyes glittering with a familiar, dangerous light. In that moment, a surge of defiance rose within me, burning away the fear that had kept me paralyzed for so long. "That's enough," I stated, my voice ringing with a strength I hadn't heard in years. "I'll take my things and go, but this isn't over, Marcus, not by a long shot." His eyes widened in surprise, and for a fleeting moment I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his features. But it was quickly replaced by his usual bravado. "Is that so?" he scoffed. "And just what do you plan to do about it, old woman?" I said nothing, simply holding his gaze with a newfound resilience. Claire's words echoed in my mind. "We have everything we need. Justice will prevail." As I gathered the last of my belongings, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The battle lines had been drawn, and for the first time in years I felt like I was finally fighting back. Marcus and Lauren might have thought they had me beaten, but they were about to learn a very painful lesson. The meek, downtrodden woman they had tormented was gone, replaced by a force they would soon come to fear. With Ethan and Claire at my side, I was no longer powerless. I was a mother on a mission, fueled by righteous fury and an unshakable determination to see justice served. As we departed, leaving Marcus and Lauren to stew in their toxic arrogance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity for them. They had no idea what was coming, the reckoning that awaited them for their cruelty and greed. But I did, and I could hardly wait. With the evidence securely in our possession, Ethan, Claire, and I made our way to the law offices of Samantha Wilkins, a formidable attorney Claire had connected with through her paralegal network. As we settled into the plush chairs of her office, Miss Wilkins wasted no time getting down to business. She was a no-nonsense woman, her gaze sharp and assessing as she listened to the details of my ordeal. "This is a clear-cut case of elder abuse and financial exploitation," she stated matter-of-factly once I had finished speaking. "With the audio and video evidence you've provided, we have a very strong case against your son and daughter-in-law." Relief washed over me, tempered by a lingering sense of guilt. Marcus might have treated me abysmally, but he was still my child, my flesh and blood. Could I really bring myself to pursue legal action against him? Ethan, ever perceptive, seemed to sense my inner turmoil. "No more turning the other cheek, Mom," he said firmly, reaching across the desk to take my hand in his. "Let justice speak." Claire nodded emphatically. "He had his chance to treat you with respect and decency. Now it's time for him to face the consequences of his actions." Miss Wilkinson's expression softened slightly as she regarded me. "I understand this is a difficult decision, Mrs. Wilson, but your son and his wife have committed serious crimes, both morally and legally. You have every right to seek justice and restitution." Her words rang true, echoing the righteous anger that had been simmering within me since my confrontation with Marcus. For too long, I had allowed familial ties to blind me to the truth. That my own child had become a monster, consumed by greed and entitlement. "What are the potential penalties they could be facing?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turbulent emotions swirling within me. Miss Wilkins didn't mince words. "Given the severity of the abuse and the financial crimes involved, we're looking at potential jail time, hefty fines, and the loss of any claim to your assets or inheritance." A tremor ran through me at the thought of Marcus behind bars, but I quickly pushed it aside. He had brought this upon himself through his own despicable actions. "Good," I said, lifting my chin defiantly. "It's time he learned that actions have consequences." Ethan beamed at me, pride shining in his eyes. Claire, too, looked immensely pleased, nodding her approval. Over the next hour, Miss Wilkins outlined our legal strategy, explaining the intricate process we would need to follow to build an ironclad case. It was a daunting prospect, but with each minute that ticked by, my resolve only grew stronger. No more cowering in fear. No more allowing myself to be victimized by those who were supposed to love and protect me. This was my life, my hard-earned legacy, and I would be damned if I let Marcus and Lauren continue to trample all over it. As we departed the law offices, Ethan pulled me into a fierce embrace. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You're finally taking a stand, and we'll be with you every step of the way." Claire chimed in, her expression one of pure admiration. "Those two have no idea what's coming for them. They're about to learn that karma is a force to be reckoned with." A small, grim smile tugged at my lips as I looked between my son and daughter-in-law. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose, a fire ignited within me that refused to be extinguished. Marcus and Lauren thought they could bully and manipulate their way through life, trampling over anyone who stood in their path to wealth and power. But they were about to discover that this frail, meek old woman had finally found her backbone. And I intended to make them regret ever crossing me. In the weeks that followed, our legal team worked tirelessly to build an airtight case against Marcus and Lauren. Every piece of evidence was meticulously cataloged, every potential witness interviewed and deposed. Through it all, my newfound determination never wavered. If anything, each new revelation, every sordid detail that came to light about my son and daughter-in-law's misdeeds only served to further stoke the flames of my righteous anger. It was during one such meeting with Ms. Wilkins that we received a bombshell piece of information, courtesy of Claire's tenacious investigation skills. "I've uncovered something that might help explain Marcus and Lauren's desperation," she announced, a grim look on her face as she slid a stack of financial records across the table. Miss Wilkins' brow furrowed as she scanned the documents, her frown deepening with each passing minute. Finally, she looked up, her expression grave. "These records show a pattern of reckless spending and mounting debt, all concealed from you, Samantha," she stated, her voice laced with a quiet fury. "It would appear that your son's motivations went far beyond simple greed. He was drowning in a sea of his own making, and he saw your inheritance as his lifeline." A sickening realization washed over me as the pieces fell into place. Marcus's increasingly erratic behavior, his desperation to gain control over my finances, it all made sense now. He was a man backed into a corner, lashing out like a rabid animal in his desperation to escape the consequences of his own actions. Ethan slammed his fist on the table, his face contorted with rage. That lying, manipulative bastard, he seethed. He was using Mom as his own personal piggy bank this whole time. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of Marcus's betrayal. Not only had he robbed me of my dignity and sense of security, but he had also systematically drained me of the financial stability my beloved Will had worked so hard to provide. In that moment, any lingering shred of sympathy or familial affection I might have harbored for my eldest son evaporated. He was no longer the bright-eyed little boy I had once doted on. He was a monster, consumed by greed and self-interest, willing to sacrifice his own flesh and blood on the altar of his own hubris. They think they can just bully their way out of this, Miss Wilkins stated, her voice cutting through my tumultuous thoughts. They're about to be in for a rude awakening. Her words resonated deep within me, sparking a renewed sense of determination. Marcus and Lauren had made a grave miscalculation. They had underestimated the indomitable spirit of a mother scorned. As the court date loomed ever closer, our team doubled down on our efforts, leaving no stone unturned in our quest for justice. I, too, played my part, scouring through old records and documents, determined to uncover any shred of evidence that could be used against my traitorous son and his equally despicable wife. The tension was palpable, the weight of the impending battle weighing heavily upon us all. But in those quiet moments when doubt threatened to creep in, I would remind myself of the strength that had carried me this far. The unbreakable bond I shared with Ethan and Claire, the unwavering support of our legal team, and the knowledge that I was finally taking a stand against those who had wronged me so grievously. Marcus and Lauren might have thought they could bully and manipulate their way out of this mess, but they were sorely mistaken. The tides had turned, and they were about to face the full force of a mother's wrath, fueled by years of pain and betrayal. No more cowering in fear, no more allowing myself to be a victim. This was my moment, my chance to reclaim the life and dignity that had been so cruelly stripped from me. And as the courtroom doors loomed ahead, I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that justice would finally be served. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. As I stepped into the courtroom, flanked by Ethan and Claire, a hush fell over the gallery. All eyes were upon us, the spectators no doubt sensing the palpable tension that hung in the air. Marcus and Lauren were already seated at the defendant's table, their expressions a studied mix of boredom and disdain. But I could see the flicker of uncertainty in my son's eyes, the barely perceptible tightening of his jaws he caught sight of me. Good, I thought grimly. Let him squirm. Miss Wilkins wasted no time in laying out our case, her opening statement a masterful blend of facts and emotional resonance. She painted a vivid picture of the abuse and exploitation I had endured, holding nothing back as she methodically outlined the evidence against Marcus and Lauren. When the first audio recording was played, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence, punctuated only by Marcus's venomous words echoing from the speakers. "Hurry up, you useless old hag, or do you need another lesson in respect?" A collective gasp rippled through the gallery, and I couldn't help but steal a glance at my son. His face had drained of color, his bravado momentarily shaken as the full weight of his actions was laid bare for all to witness. But it was only the beginning. Over the next few hours, a damning portrait emerged, one of greed, cruelty, and utter disregard for the most sacred of familial bonds. Video footage showed Marcus physically intimidating me, his towering form looming over my frail stature as he hurled insults and threats. Witness after witness took the stand, corroborating my accounts of the emotional and financial abuse I had endured. Neighbors testified to hearing raised voices and heated arguments emanating from my former home, while financial experts broke down the intricate web of deceit Marcus had woven in his quest to drain my inheritance. Through it all, Lauren remained stoic, her perfectly coiffed veneer never slipping. But Marcus grew increasingly agitated, his mask of indifference cracking with each new piece of damning evidence. It all came to a head during the cross-examination, when the prosecution's line of questioning backed him into a corner, forcing him to confront the true depths of his depravity. "So, let me get this straight, Mr. Wilson," the prosecutor said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You systematically isolated and abused your own mother, all in the hopes of gaining control over her finances to cover up your own reckless spending and mounting debts?" Marcus visibly bristled, his face flushing an angry crimson. "That's a lie!" he snarled, his voice rising in desperation. "I was just trying to help her, to protect her assets." The prosecutor arched an eyebrow, his gaze unwavering. "Is that so? Then how do you explain the recordings of you threatening physical violence against her? Or the financial records clearly indicating that you had already begun siphoning funds from her accounts for your own personal use?" A muscle twitched in Marcus's jaw as he struggled to formulate a response, his eyes darting wildly around the courtroom. In that moment, he looked every bit the cornered animal, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of his own lies and deceit. "You can't prove any of that," he finally spat, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. But the prosecutor simply smiled, a cold, predatory gleam in his eye. "I believe the evidence speaks for itself, Mr. Wilson. Your lies are over. The truth is undeniable." As Marcus erupted into a fit of impotent rage, hurling insults and accusations that only further condemned him, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction wash over me. The monster who had tormented me for so long was finally being unmasked, his true nature laid bare for all to see, and as the judge called for order, his gavel ringing out like a death knell, I knew that justice was finally within my grasp. The long, arduous battle was nearly over, and I had no doubt that victory would be ours. The courtroom fell deathly silent as the judge prepared to deliver his verdict. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation, and the weight of the evidence that had been so meticulously laid out before him. Marcus and Lauren sat rigidly at the defendant's table, their faces pale masks of forced indifference. But I could see the fear flickering in my son's eyes, the subtle tremor in his hands betraying the bravado he so desperately clung to. Good, I thought grimly. Let him squirm. The judge cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping over the courtroom with an impassive weight. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented," he began, his voice ringing out with a clarity that seemed to echo off the very walls, "I have no choice but to find the defendants, Marcus Wilson and Lauren Wilson, guilty on all counts." A hushed murmur rippled through the gallery, but I remained utterly still, my focus locked solely on the man who had once been my beloved child. Marcus's jaw clenched tightly, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table with a vice-like grip. The judge continued, his words measured and precise. "The crimes committed against Samantha Wilson were nothing short of reprehensible, a gross violation of the most sacred of familial bonds, driven by greed and a callous disregard for human decency." With each passing second, Marcus's composure crumbled a little more, his mask of indifference fracturing like a fragile shell. Lauren, too, seemed to shrink in on herself, her perfectly coiffed veneer finally slipping as the reality of their situation set in. In addition to the emotional and psychological trauma inflicted upon the victim, the judge went on, the financial exploitation and fraudulent activities uncovered during this trial warrant severe consequences. He leveled his gaze squarely at Marcus, his expression one of stern condemnation. "Mr. Wilson, your actions have shown a blatant disrespect for the law and a complete lack of remorse for the suffering you have caused. As such, I am sentencing you to a term of 5 years in state prison, along with a substantial fine to be paid as restitution to your mother." Marcus erupted, his chair clattering to the floor as he surged to his feet. "This is a travesty," he bellowed, spittle flying from his lips. "You can't do this to me!" The courtroom descended into chaos as bailiffs rushed to restrain the enraged man, his howls of protest echoing off the walls. Lauren remained frozen in her seat, her perfectly manicured hands trembling violently as she watched the scene unfold. Through it all, I remained a silent observer, a strange sense of calm washing over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of months of pain and struggle reckoning that Marcus had brought upon himself through his own despicable actions. As my son was finally dragged from the courtroom, his curses and threats ringing in our ears, the judge turned his attention to Lauren. "As for you, Mrs. Wilson," he said, his voice laced with contempt, "your role in this sordid affair cannot be understated. While you may not have been the primary instigator, your complicity and willful ignorance make you just as culpable." Lauren flinched as if she had been struck, her perfectly composed facade finally shattering under the weight of the judge's condemnation. "As such, I am sentencing you to a term of 3 years in state prison, to be followed by a substantial probationary period," the judge continued. "Furthermore, you are hereby ordered to pay a significant fine as restitution to the victim, and all assets acquired through ill-gotten means will be seized and returned to their rightful owner." A strangled sob escaped Lauren's lips, her hands flying to cover her mouth as the full gravity of her situation crashed down upon her. In that moment, she looked small and pitiful, a far cry from the arrogant, entitled woman who had once lorded over my life with such disdain. But I felt no pity for her, nor for the man who had once been my beloved son. They had brought this upon themselves, and now they would face the consequences of their actions, a hard-won lesson in the true meaning of karma. As the courtroom slowly emptied, the spectators buzzing with the excitement of the day's events, I felt a sense of profound relief wash over me. The long, arduous battle was finally over, and justice had prevailed. Ethan and Claire enveloped me in a fierce embrace, their faces shining with pride and vindication. "You did it, Mom," Ethan murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You stood up to them, and you won." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I had been carrying. "Justice will find you, whether you welcome it or not," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound strength and conviction. And as we stepped out into the warm embrace of the day, I knew that a new chapter was beginning. One where I was finally free to live my life on my own terms, unburdened by the weight of betrayal and exploitation. The path ahead might be uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was a survivor, a fighter, and I would never again allow myself to be a victim. The battle was won, and the war was finally over. The weeks following the trial were a whirlwind of activity, as Marcus and Lauren were forced to vacate my home under the court's orders. With each box they packed, each remnant of their poisonous presence that was removed, I felt a little lighter, a little more free. Ethan and Claire were by my side every step of the way, their support and guidance invaluable as I began the process of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Together, we meticulously went through every room, every drawer, every nook and cranny, purging the space of the toxic energy that had lingered for far too long. As the last of Marcus and Lauren's belongings were finally carted away, Ethan pulled me into a fierce embrace. "The ghosts of the past are gone, Mom," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome back to your home." Tears stung my eyes, but for once they were born not of sorrow or despair, but of relief. A cathartic release of all the pain and anguish I had endured at the hands of those who were supposed to love and protect me. In the days and weeks that followed, Ethan, Claire, and their children became a constant, joyful presence in my life, filling the once empty halls with the sound of laughter and love. Their frequent visits were a balm to my weary soul, a reminder that I was no longer alone, no longer forced to cower in the shadows of my own home. As the physical scars of Marcus and Lauren's occupation faded, the emotional wounds began to heal as well. With the help of a therapist recommended by Claire, I slowly unpacked the trauma I had endured, confronting the fear and self-doubt that had allowed me to become a victim in the first place. It wasn't an easy journey, but each small victory, every step forward on the path to reclaiming my sense of self, filled me with a newfound strength and resilience. I was no longer the meek, downtrodden woman who had allowed herself to be systematically stripped of her dignity and autonomy. I was a survivor, a fighter, and I would never again let anyone hold that kind of power over me. As the months passed, news of Marcus and Lauren's legal troubles began to trickle in, each update a bittersweet reminder of the price they had paid for their greed and cruelty. Claire, ever the tenacious investigator, kept me apprised of every development, her face glowing with a sense of grim satisfaction each time a new piece of evidence came to light. "They're getting everything they deserve," she would say, her voice laced with a quiet fury. "And then some." I couldn't argue with her assessment. As painful as it was to watch my own son crumble under the weight of his misdeeds, a part of me couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. He had made his choices, and now he was facing the consequences, a harsh lesson in the true meaning of karma. But even as the legal battles raged on, my focus remained firmly on the present, on the hard-won sanctuary I had reclaimed for myself. With each passing day, the echoes of Marcus and Lauren's reign of terror faded a little more, replaced by the warmth and laughter of a true family, one built on love, respect, and an unbreakable bond that no amount of cruelty or betrayal could ever hope to sever. As I stood in the living room one evening, surrounded by Ethan, Claire, and their children, I couldn't help but marvel at the transformation that had taken place. The once oppressive silence had given way to a cacophony of joy and laughter, the shadows banished by the radiant glow of love and acceptance. This was my life, my legacy, a hard-won victory snatched from the jaws of despair and suffering. And as I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by me through it all, I knew that no matter what challenges the future might hold, I would never again be alone. The battle was over, the war had been won, and I had emerged from the ashes a stronger, more resilient version of myself, a phoenix rising, reborn in the flames of my own indomitable spirit.